Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Zero Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and joining us now is Aijens Background. Aijens is director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance and co-director of a campaign called Caring Across Generations. She is also the author of a new book entitled The Age of Dignity: Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America. Aijens, we're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Great. Listen, I think this is a very important book at a very important time, and I wanted to talk to you about it. But first, I want to just give our listeners a sense of who you are and how you came to write this book. You've been working with domestic workers for years. You were the recipient of a MacArthur Foundation grant for your work in that area. If I have the sequence of your life correct, and I'm not sure I do, but I think from the Domestic Workers Alliance, you went into the Caring Across Generations initiative. So, could you tell us a little bit about that work and how that evolved?
Absolutely. So I spent almost the last 20 years almost working alongside domestic workers, nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers who really struggle, even though they do such critical work to support our families, caring for the most precious elements of our lives, our children, our elders, our homes. They are among the most undervalued and vulnerable workers in our economy. And I've spent the last 20 years working alongside those workers to really assert the dignity of this work and raise up how valuable it is to the families and really raise awareness about the fact that this is among the most undervalued work, and the workers are, as a result, really struggling to care for their own families and make ends meet on their incomes. And
So,
what happened was basically we started realizing that more and more domestic workers were getting called upon by their employers to do elder care, caring for people with Alzheimer's or people with chronic illnesses. And they were asking for training in this work because they really felt underprepared to do what they're being called upon to do. And it was such a pattern that we decided to take a step back and try to understand what was happening. And that's when we came upon the demographic reality of the elder boom, where millions of American families are struggling to meet their caregiving needs in light of the fact that people are living longer than ever, and the baby boom generation is reaching retirement age at a rate of 10,000 people per day. And so the domestic workers are part of the solution for many, many families, but it's an unsustainable solution because the workforce is so undervalued and the wages are so low. So Caring Across Generations was an effort to bring families and workers and seniors, all of us together, to create a new care infrastructure, a new valuing of caregiving for our society to really support the changing needs of American families in light of this demographic shift.
well, and one of the things that you're listening to the Zero Hour. We're talking to Aijens Background about the National Domestic Workers Alliance and Caring Across Generations. One of the things that struck me about this was that domestic workers and the importance of your organization's work in this area, domestic workers have lived somewhat on the fringe of social awareness as working people and as complete human beings. They're almost invisible to the larger society in many ways. So your work, to me, has been part of the process of making them visible, making them seen as what they are, which is fully human, fully part of the society, working people like any other set of working people. And the elderly, too, have suffered from a kind of invisibility in our culture and marginalization. And it seems to me that that by linking the two issues, in a way, you are also expanding the umbra or the awareness of the humanity of larger sets of our population. Have you given much thought to that dimension of it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we are all caregivers or going to be caregivers, or we will need care if we don't already. And So there is something incredibly universal about this experience that elders and domestic workers are really on the front lines of right now. And we believe that if we in Caring Across Generations believe that if we make that experience more visible, if we really value the humanity and the dignity of the people who are really on the front lines of our changing caregiving needs in this country, that it will truly support all of us. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes when you shine a light on those who are least visible within our economy and in our culture, it really does point the way forward such that the greatest number of people can benefit. And that is that is the opportunity with Caring Across Generations, is for caregivers and our elders to really lead the way to a solution for the future that lifts all of us.
So before we move into the book, and that's very well said, before we move into the book, so I mean, in a way, it's a reweaving or a weaving of the fabric of society together with its various elements, getting the threads woven back together. Um, Before we get into the specifics of the book, so what is the current status of your efforts with the Domestic Workers Alliance and Caring Across Generations? Where do those initiatives stand now? What are your victories, your hopes for the near future, and so on?
Great question. So the domestic workers have been organizing and coming together for almost 20 years now, more than 20 years in some localities like Los Angeles. And we have a vibrant movement where 45 local organizations in 26 cities around the country are bringing workers together, offering training, offering resources, working on legislative agenda items. And so far, we've won domestic worker bills of rights in 4 states, with Massachusetts in 2014 being the most recent state. And we won a very strong bill there that included maternity leave for caregivers, which is a huge, huge, huge step forward. And with Caring Across Generations, we've been working on expanding access to Medicaid and supporting the Keep Me Home initiative, for example, in states like Maine, which is a comprehensive statewide agenda to support aging in place for seniors that includes provisions for caregivers as well. So Caring Across has been looking for every opportunity to create win-win pathways for families and workers while strengthening the workforce for the future. And so one big piece of that is moving forward a rule change at the Department of Labor that would bring 2 million home care workers who are currently excluded from minimum wage and overtime protections under the protections of our laws, just like every other worker. And that has made a tremendous amount of progress. In fact, it was supposed to go into effect on January 1st, and we are now stuck in some litigation. But we believe that justice and equity in this instance is inevitable. And so we're continuing to move and push that forward. There's much to do, in other words.
I'm sure. And before we move on to a break and then talking about the book, one final question on that, because I think there will be people listening who say, well, you know, I can barely afford the care for my kids or my parents or whatever. And is part of the initiative working also to address those concerns?
Yes, exactly. There's 3 goals for our framework for the future. One is maximum choice, affordability, and accessibility for families and seniors, for consumers. We believe that families need support in terms of affording the care that they need. There is no way that we can bear this cost alone, and it has to be shared. So families have to plan and save, certainly, but there needs to be more supports in the form of public social programs that can support affordability. The second pillar is around quality of care. We really want to make sure that we continue to elevate the quality of life for our aging loved ones and the quality of care that they're receiving as they age. So that's a big piece. And the third piece is quality of jobs. Just like we turned manufacturing jobs in the 20s and 30s from sweatshop, dangerous jobs into good jobs where each generation could do better than the next and you could really take pride in your work. That's what we must do with home care jobs, which are the fastest growing occupation in the country because of the demand. Quality jobs, quality care, maximum choice and affordability. That's the way forward, and it has to be a win-win. We are completely interdependent here.
And caregiving jobs, at least under current technology, cannot be outsourced offshore. So when we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk further with Aijens Background, director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, co-founder of the Caring Across Generations Initiative, and author of the book, The Age of Dignity. Please stick with us. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. And we are back on the Zero Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow. We are talking with Aijens Background, who among her other many distinctive accomplishments is the author of The Age of Dignity and is a certified genius, I guess, because of that MacArthur Foundation grant, right?
I don't know about that, but yes, I was very honored to receive the MacArthur Fellowship this year.
It could be tough to live that one down, I guess. But we're very pleased for you. And let's talk about the book a little bit, The Age of America, The Age of Dignity. You point out very early on the staggering statistics that we've discussed on this program too, but the fact that we will see a doubling of our elder population by 2035, we will have 11.5 million elder Americans in this country. The fact that we also have a employment issue, the fact that these workers are kept on the margins. How do you see these two solutions or these two problems coming together in a unified solution?
Well, it's actually quite simple in many ways. There's a huge need on the part of American families for support. That need has actually been there for a long time. The fact that we don't have a plan or any programs that support long-term care is a major gap in our social infrastructure. And so now is the time to invest and create that infrastructure. And when we do, what that means is we free up American working families to be able to participate fully in the workforce, and we can create millions of good jobs in caregiving that can't be outsourced for the future, for the 21st century. It is absolutely a win-win. And this is not to replace family caregiving. There will always be a huge need for family caregivers, but there can be no question that we're going to need a really strong, sustainable, professional care workforce to support the 27 million of us who will need long-term care or assistance by the year 2050. So it's an opportunity to address the jobs crisis and the care crisis. In some ways, these two crises solve each other. And what it requires is the courage of the millions of us who are directly affected by this issue to really step forward and call upon our elected leaders to say, this private crisis and private challenge that we've been grappling with behind closed doors in our homes, it has to be a national public priority. It has to be a priority for the future of this country.
And particularly, I would think, as we've seen, excuse me, the breakdown of the traditional, over the last more than century, of the traditional kind of rural village-based support systems and family systems, as we've seen change in the workforce. So that, we don't have stay-at-home caregivers in nuclear families anymore, for example. So in effect, it requires a policy solution, and I want to get back to that. But Aijens Background, there's a dimension of this that I'd also like to mention out of personal experience, which is I have a close family member who is elderly, very elderly, a parent, and has needed very intensive care, including at times round-the-clock care. And one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I think we don't talk about a lot in this country, even those of us who talk about the economic and public policy issues, is the extraordinary level of intimacy that's
Mm-hmm.
created between a care worker and the care worker's client. At times, for example, the care worker has had to sleep with my parent, because
Mm-hmm.
she'll get up and fall. So um, my my parents' caregiving situation has changed somewhat now, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is that this is not only a social issue; it has a very deep emotional dimension to it, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Caregiving. It's so funny. There's so many professional dimensions to it in terms of skills. I mean, everything from being nutritionists to, you know, monitoring medication to lifting to cooking to everything. And there is a tremendous emotional dimension to this where that human connection can be the difference truly between somebody feeling like their humanity and their dignity is being valued and recognized as they age and not. I mean, it is absolutely a game-changing dimension to quality of life for our aging loved ones. That emotional connection and that human connection.
And we live in a culture that seems more comfortable with statistics than emotions. And so, for example, the word love embarrasses a lot of people, but there's been real love among caregivers and family members in my family. And I mean, that can be misused, and it can be, we all know the Southern, she's like a member of the family, patronizing dimension, but I don't mean it in that way. And do you understand
No,
what I'm driving at?
I absolutely do. And I mean, this is the thing. To be completely honest about this, I mean, it's a very complicated relationship.
Hmm.
These relationships are not simple and incredibly emotionally charged in very good ways and also very challenging ways.
Right.
And in some ways, as an extension of the family dynamic and the caregiving relationships that exist in the families, it is absolutely emotional and challenging. And I think that that's actually, it speaks to the value of this relationship in the context of a humane system
Hmm.
for both healthcare, right, and non medical caregiving. It's a it's about our humanity and about the soul of the country in many ways that we really honor these relationships and value them for their worth, and even inside of all of the complexity there.
Yes, yeah, very much so. In fact, I found myself having to let somebody go because we had no money for them, and it was excruciating all around. And I think that one of the things, as we draw to the end of this interview, Ajapu, one of the things that I think your book, your movement, your efforts can address is the fact that we shouldn't have to, neither the workers nor the families should have to face that kind of situation alone or be left to fend for themselves under these trying circumstances.
Well, that is exactly it. If there were no other more important message that we hope to get across, is that all of us who are grappling with the caregiving needs of our families, regardless of the dimension, whether you're a family caregiver, a senior, or a worker, you are not alone. This is all of us. This is about all of us. And our solutions have to reflect our interconnectedness and our interdependence too. And when they do, they will unlock so much human potential and possibility within our economy and within our culture. And it is necessary, it is timely, and when it happens, it will be so hopeful for our prospects for really embracing the changing demographics in this country.
Well, that is beautifully said, and I don't think anything can be said, at least by me, to improve upon it. So I think we will leave it there. Aijens Background, director of the National I'm now Domestic Workers Alliance, co-founder of Caring Across Generations, and author of the important new book, The Age of Dignity: Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and we will be back with more of our program. This is The Zero Hour.